The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Francis Scott Fitzgerald.
The hierarchical nature of life.
In the chapter, What is God?, we used the metaphor of Missy the cell and agreed that life can exist on multiple levels. In our metaphor, we considered two levels, cells and Missy, but if we think about it, we can identify at least one more intermediate level in the life of a multicellular organism, the level of organs. Why can we classify organs as a distinct level? Because after Missy, the organism level dies, her organs can continue to live for some time. They can even be transplanted into other animals, right? And when the organs finally stop functioning, some of the cells that make them up are still alive, metabolizing for a while longer before they too become non-living. Let's figure out how it happens that life suddenly organizes itself into a hierarchy. After all, according to the theory of Charles Darwin, familiar to us since school days, the main driver of evolution is natural selection, or to put it simply, intra- and interspecies competition. But if everything boiled down to competition, then single-celled organisms should have spent billions of years simply competing for better conditions. Nothing would have pushed them to band together into organisms. It seems Darwin simply overlooked another powerful driving force of evolution, intra- and interspecies cooperation. In the previous chapter, when we introduced the concept of subjectivity, we noted that right after the fundamental contradiction of me versus not me, the very first level of complexity for the simplest model of the universe must be the ability to distinguish between beneficial, good, and dangerous, bad entities or phenomena. In other words, the ability to divide the universe into friends and foes. Back then we called such a model the social model of the universe. In other words,
the first and natural instinct of living beings is the urge to unite with friends, cooperation, and separate from enemies, competition.
It's only thanks to cooperation that solitary, scattered cells come together and create something qualitatively new. Multicellular organisms. The same cooperative instinct drives animals to form herds and packs, insects to build swarms and anthills, and humans to create families, tribes, communities, and nations. Cooperation lays the groundwork for specialization of individual elements within an organism, which in turn requires coordination and management for the survival of the whole, the organism. This marks a higher level in life's hierarchy, a level where the entire organism becomes a new me and everything else is seen as not me. And when it comes to each individual element of the organism,
for any social living being, beyond the me, not me contradiction, there's also the contradiction of me, us, where us is the friendly part of the universe, including the me.
Why is me, us a contradiction? Because every living being constantly has to decide what matters more, me or us. Cooperation can be very deep or, on the contrary, quite superficial. It all depends on the level of autonomy of the cooperating beings. But we'll talk more about that in the next chapter. Well then, all these reflections on cooperation are presented here for one reason only, to justify the following conclusion for you.
Life consists of levels. with each higher level of the hierarchy standing on the shoulders of the previous lower level.
If we agree that life is inherently hierarchical, then why should we stop at cells as the lowest and most primitive level of life? We've already established that the very bottom step in life's hierarchy must be occupied by a form of life whose model of the universe is the simplest possible. Namely, the universe is everything that is not me. But if you recall in the chapter What is the Meaning of Life, we already established that even a single-celled amoeba has a far more complex model of the universe. And in a multicellular organism, every cell can recognize and appropriately respond to thousands of different external conditions, more or less nutrients, the rise or fall of levels of dozens of hormones, whether it's time to divide or not yet, etc. Not to mention, a cell can mount incredibly complex immune responses to viral attacks and retain immunological memory across many generations of cells. Moreover, a cell isn't a simple creature. Each cell contains undeniably foreign living elements, mitochondria. Mitochondria have their own independent hereditary mechanism. By studying this mechanism, geneticists can trace your maternal lineage. In other words, a cell is essentially a kind of symbiosis of independent living entities from two different species. No, dear reader, a cell cannot be the first and most primitive level in the hierarchy of life. Its model of the universe is far too complex for that. There must be at least one more simpler level of the hierarchy, beneath the cellular one. Let's try to imagine such a level. Cells are made up of proteins, just as Missy is made up of cells. So does that mean proteins are alive too? That sounds a bit too unusual, if not downright insane.
Proteins? Alive? Are you out of your mind?
First of all, so you don't keep flinching every time, let's agree on how we'll refer to the different levels of life hierarchy. Calling all of them alive isn't just counterintuitive, it's methodologically incorrect. It's like trying to describe all our tactile sensations in terms of pain. Pain is just one particular level of tactile perception. Alongside it, there are sensations like a breeze, a touch, a firm handshake, and so on, all of which are qualitatively different things. So let's continue calling only the familiar cellular forms of life, bacteria, plants, and organisms, alive. And the more primitive forms, which, as we've established, must exist, we refer to as proto-living. That will more accurately reflect reality.
Proto-living entities are representatives of forms of life that exist in the hierarchy below the cellular level.
Thus, there are proto-living levels of life's hierarchy upon which the living levels rest. The level above them could perhaps be called the intelligent level. And for the sake of completeness, let's give a generalized term for all of these entities. Since all living things possess subjectivity, I will refer to all known and unknown representatives of life as subjective entities, italicized and capitalized.
A subjective entity is a discrete element of matter capable of maintaining its own homeostasis through its own model of the universe.
At this point, the reader might exclaim,
Why not consider a dull stone to be your subjective entity? I mean, why not imagine that a stone has its own model of the universe, through which it perfectly maintains its homeostasis?
I promise, you'll get an answer to this perfectly reasonable question, just not now. We'll get to it in the chapter 8 of part 2. So, could proteins be proto-living? Could they be considered subjective entities? Well, why not? It does sound rather unusual, but I always remember how strange and absurd it seemed to me as a child when I first learned that trees are also alive. What do you mean, alive? The horsey and the doggy are alive because they run and eat. But trees, Trees don't run, don't eat. How could they be alive? Something doesn't add up here. I think many readers had similar thoughts in childhood, but over time we all just got used to this initially bizarre idea. What can we say about proteins? The vast diversity of proteins forms an entire intracellular civilization, much like the familiar diversity of cells forms the civilization that sustains an organism. Just as cells serve the body, proteins serve their host cell, carrying out a wide range of functions: protective, regulatory, signaling, transport, receptor-based, motor, and more. Proteins are somehow able to spontaneously fold into insanely complex three-dimensional molecular structures, structures whose physical and chemical properties differ radically from those of a chemically identical compound laid out as a single unfolded strand. Proteins are extraordinarily stable across a wide range of external conditions. More impressively, they can repair themselves, restoring their three-dimensional structure after denaturation entirely on their own. They can also alter their chemical properties, becoming acidic or alkaline depending on the circumstances, and perform countless other sophisticated feats. All of this tells us, first of all, that we're dealing with subjective entities, and second, that their models of the universe are quite developed. That is, still very, very far from the binary simplicity of me versus the universe. Which means, logically, that there must be a level below proteins in the hierarchy of life. And by now, I trust your intuition has long since whispered, there will be many more levels yet to come. But we'll get into that in the part 3 of the book. For now,
Summary.
The first natural instinct of living beings is the drive to unite with friends, cooperation, and separate from enemies, competition. For any social living being, in addition to the me, not me contradiction, there's also the me, us contradiction, where us is the friendly part of the universe, including the me. Life consists of levels, with each higher level of the hierarchy standing on the shoulders of the lower one. Proto-living entities are forms of life that exist in the hierarchy below the cellular level. A subjective entity is a discrete element of matter that can maintain its homeostasis thanks to its own model of the universe